Welcome back, everybody. It is RMAC Weekly once again. My boy Draper, he had some prior engagements tonight, so it's just gonna be me flying solo. So I hope you guys. I'm sorry that it's kind of my fault. Last night we couldn't go because I had some internet difficulties, but nonetheless, we're here. We got a bunch of games to break down, and we will have a special guest to break down what is arguably the biggest game in D2 football this week. But we want to look at the week that was and the game that we had our eyes on the most from our podcast and looking at it from our scope was Highlands and Western Colorado, the two undefeated squads. And I actually was there in person. I want to thank Amelia Lucasen for this video we got to start the game. Jeffrey Jones has a big run, but he kind of gets bottled up after this. Highlands, they start this drive. It's looking like it's going to be fruitful, but that Western defense shows its mettle. They come up with the stop. What Highlands end up going for it on fourth down. You see Ricky Freeman there to stop Ike Udengwu. But Highlands, they battled. This was in the first half was a really defensive game. It was only 10-3 going into halftime. You see Corey Martin there coming up with the sack. He had two on the day. Highlands, though, that field goal will be their only points on the day. Western, they ended up getting it going. Eventually, Quinn Bailey, the freshman from Chadron, you got to wonder how the Eagles feel seeing him come on the way he is. And then Drew Nash doing his thing, doing it on the ground. He didn't have the biggest passing day, but he did what he needed to do to get done. And then this defense again, K-Stu, Cam Cooper coming from both sides. Ike was under a lot of pressure all day, and it led to the Western victory. Like I said, they win 30-3. Defensive battle, I think in the first half, I think there was a lot of good defense being played. As you can see, Jeffrey Jones, for the first time in his career, was held to under 200 yards. Mike Jones, only one reception, a big long one. But for the most part, Highlands' big three was kind of held in check. And I think that's what led Western to the win. I think you've seen their experience throughout the game, and as it went on, they just grinded this one out. I want to give a big shout out to Ian Loomis. He didn't end up getting Player of the Week, but man, he played his tail off. He had a huge interception where he was determined to score at any cost, and he made it happen. And you guys know how I feel about intercepting passes and getting into the house. And then Ricky Freeman. Aside from the one-handed pick he had earlier in the year at Midwestern, I didn't think that he was not that he was playing bad, but necessarily that he was playing to the same level that he was playing at last year. But it seems like he's just rounding into form as the season goes on. 2.5 tackles, being disruptive, getting in the backfield. You love to see that from your best defensive player, especially as we're getting deeper into conference play. But we're going to move along to our next game, and that was the CSU-Pueblo Thunderwolves. Shout out to my guy Jason Ortiz there capturing the photos, but you know, Pueblo did it in all three phases. That's Bryson Torrey there. You're going to see the offensive stuff. This is Marcellus Honeycutt coming back after that big hit against Central Missouri. Reese Robinson, the RMAC Special Teams Player of the Week, getting freaky on this punt return, showing off the speed, showing off the elusiveness. Pueblo really did it in all three phases. You're gonna see as this highlight goes on. It's kind of hard to keep up with. It was a 45-0 lead going into halftime. In the backfield, living in the backfield, Bryson Torrey coming up with a pick six after he already scored before. That's why he got Defensive Player of the Week, deservedly so. Dedrick Taylor Akins coming up big again. You're gonna see the smirk from the ref here. This is cool. You tell he was happy he didn't actually spin that ball. And then these guys just living in the backfield, like I said, getting the sack. It didn't end up being a safety, but Caleb Madden comes up with a big sack, and Pueblo rolls. 55-7. Adams was able to score one in the third. My man Gavin Herberg, I thought he was out for the season after the injury he suffered in week 1 at Western New Mexico, but he comes back. He didn't have his best day, but he was going up against a ferocious defense, and Pueblo's offense was hitting on all cylinders. Like I said, all three phases. That punt return, that showed you that this team is focused. They didn't come out. They didn't play with their food. And kudos to them for handling business, maintaining their spot at number 12 in the nation. But moving along, let's check in on the Ore Diggers. after they suffered their first defeat of the season. He got Joseph Capra hooking up with Askell Richard, and then you're going to see Sean Gilbert. He's going to get the big hit on TJ Tukwara, and Matt Sutterall comes up with that fumble. That's going to lead to mine scoring again. This time it's going to be Pierce Richards over the top on the post. Mines, they came out with the early lead, was 14-0 after one. Black Hills, you know the kind of team they are. They're going to battle. They're not the kind of team that's just going to lay down. But it just wasn't enough for them. You're going to see once we get to this box score, Luke Doobie getting in there for the touchdown. But you see Mines wins by 9 points, 36-27. I was very impressed with Joseph Capra after kind of being bottled up somewhat last week, being under a lot of pressure to come out. Uh, Almost 70% passing, only one turnover, 3 touchdowns. He was throwing the ball down the field, stretching it. The very first play of the game, he rushed for like 50 yards to get them in scoring position before that pass to Axel Richard. So, I was really impressed with Mines and their ability to bounce back. Black Hills, it's tough. I think I got that wrong. I think I messed up when I was making our graphics, but I think they're actually 1-4 now. But it's tough sledding for Black Hills. They've played a really tough schedule this entire season, and it shows in their record. But I don't think that necessarily shows the team they are. Like I said, they battled in this one. They had their moments, but you just can't give up a 14-0 lead and expect to win ball games without forcing a bunch of turnovers. And Mines was able to force some turnovers. As you see, Hall Edmonds came up with the pick as well. And then I was really impressed with Mines' ability. Last week I pointed out after they lost how big I thought the Flynn Sheely injury was and how it was affecting this offense. But I was really impressed getting Pierce Richards and Nick Stone really involved. I think Nick Stone is a well of potential that hasn't been tapped in to as much as it could be. So I was really impressed with Mines. Landon Walker, I know he did leave the game. I'm not sure what his injury status is, but heading into the Nikos Cup game, we definitely want him back. But we got a little bit more video, and all this stuff from out in the Dakotas is from the people over at KOTA. Really appreciate them. But Fort Lewis taking on the winless SD Mines, and Fort Lewis, heading into the fourth quarter, they had a 21-10 lead. But you're going to see the Hard Rockers, they battled, man. These guys, I know they were winless coming into this game, but they're really coming on. Joshua Morales, Gage Baker, this passing game, week over week, I feel like Gage Baker's just getting a little bit better and better, getting more efficient. He throws an interception here, right as I say efficient. But nonetheless, you're going to see he wills his team to a win. Fort Lewis, they would miss a field goal, giving SD Mines the ball back, and SD Mines, they capitalized. On the stream, I did not think this was a catch, but you see that left foot got down, that toe got down. Most definitely was a catch, and that leads to the game-winning field goal. The Hard Rockers get their first win of the season in big-time comeback fashion, and you just got to feel good for them. They had a pretty tough schedule, in my opinion, to start with CSU-Pueblo off the bat, and then a Michigan Tech team that early in the season, Michigan Tech has been ranked at one point in this season. It's a tough GLIAC foe. They had a rough start to it, but I think you just saw the fight within this week, and it finally worked out in their favor. That missed field goal was big for Fort Lewis. They could have made it to where SD Mines had to go get a touchdown, but when you don't capitalize and you give teams opportunities, this is what can happen. I know this one has to hurt for Fort Lewis. They got to be a little sour about this one. But I mean, on the Skyhawks side, you didn't have Stone Walker, and you still had a 21-10 lead going into the fourth quarter. So you have to feel kind of good about that. Zachary Gamont is fast. He can run. I'd like to see them take more deep shots with him. Try to get him more involved. Even maybe some like jet sweep type stuff. He has a lot of speed. But kudos to the Hard Rockers. Kudos to Gage Baker, Joshua Morales, Jacoby Agbana. That was a huge catch. He's a freshman. I've mentioned his name throughout this season. I think he has a beeline on that freshman of the year for the conference. But looking at our last game for the week, Colorado Mesa, my old school, my alma mater, they traveled up to Chadron, and Chadron heading into halftime, 17-7 lead. Chadron seemed to be in control, but the Mavs stormed back in the fourth quarter, show a lot of fight. They come up on the short end of the stick, but this is to a Chadron team that I think isn't can't be far off of, like, Chadron beat Mines as a ranked team, and Chadron is undefeated in conference play. I think they're a real threat. Right now, Chadron's proven that they can play great defense, and their offense has come alive under Aiden Thompson. 34 points. That's big time. That's not something that I remember in past years. I've been complaining about their offense and it not, being as dynamic as it needs to be. I think you're starting to see that change under Aiden Thompson. And then the running game, Daytwan Pearson, Quincy Riker, he scored a touchdown this week. And then Tommy Thomas, man, he's just so consistent. He hasn't had a crazy game. He hasn't had a 200-yard game yet this season, but I mean, I want to say he scored a touchdown for like 3 or 4 straight weeks. So, kudos to Chadron. They're keeping it rolling after starting 0-2 playing UNC and then Kearney. But in conference play, they're making it happen, and you got to believe that their confidence week after week has to be going up. So kudos to them. Mesa, they got a tough challenge heading into next week. But before we get to next week, we want to highlight some of our top players from the conference this past week. Like I mentioned, Joseph Capper getting that offensive player of the week, the 3 touchdowns, only 1 interception. I told you he had the big long run. He just guided that Mines offense. It was swarm days for Black Hills, so it was a big game, big fan environment. He went into the enemy territory and did what he had to do and was efficient about it. On the defensive end, Bryson Torrey, man, what a day. 2 touchdowns as the defender, like that has to be a defender's dream. I never had a two-touchdown game. I wish I did. And to do it in 2 different ways. His first one, we didn't have the full video of it, but he actually just stripped the running back and just took it from him and just ran the other way and scored a touchdown. It actually reminded me of Brandon Payer for those of you that know and remember the old CSU-Pueblo. Like, I've seen him do things like that. But then getting the pick six, having the ability to read and react fast in the quicks game and making it happen. Big time effort by him. And that Pueblo that Fort Hays loss may have been the best thing for this team. And I think that's proven to be true. And then like we mentioned earlier, Reese Robinson, the special teams player, you saw that punt return. It was a long one. CSU Pueblo, I wouldn't want to be playing them next week. But speaking of them, and we want to look at the top 25 before we get to next week. Western and Pueblo still holding serve at 5-12. Nothing's changed for us as far as the conference goes. There's a couple new guys in here. I think UNC Pembroke at number 24 is entering the fray. I'm not sure if Northwest Missouri was in it before last week, but they look like a team that's looking really good in the MIAA. So, but let's talk more about our conference. Let's talk about next week. We got rivalry games. Mesa's heading down to Golden for the Nikos Cup. Mines is looking to get their revenge after losing a game that they probably weren't. There's nobody expected Mesa to win that game last year. So, they're going to be looking for their revenge. It's a rivalry game. I imagine that one's going to be packed out and crazy. You got Western heading to Fort Lewis. I feel bad for the Skyhawks coming off a tough loss where you probably feel like you had that game. That's probably no fun. Adams looking to get off the schneid. I don't know. I don't know against Chadron in that defense. And then Pueblo heading to Highlands, which is a sneaky good game. Highlands kind of maybe got humbled a little bit last week, but I imagine they're going to be chomping at the bit. But last but not least, what I'm going to be calling the biggest game in D2 this week is the 140th Black Hills Brawl. And before we get in this game, like I said, I was going to have a special guest tonight. And it's none other than one of the head coaches that'll be coaching in this game and has coached in it for several years. Want to bring to the stage, let me take this down. Sorry, Coach. Head coach Charlie Flohr from South Dakota Mines, the Hard Rockers. He's been leading the program for, what is this, your 6th year, Coach?
Yes, sir. Year 6. It's gone fast.
How does it feel to be in year six?
Yeah, it's great. Obviously here at South Dakota Mines, say I'm working at a phenomenal institution. Got world class kids, world class institution, and what a great place for me and my family to be back closer to home. Grew up about an hour and a half away from Rapid City, so all in all, things are well here in Rapid City.
How are things in Rapid City after getting that electrifying first win last week? What was that like after having some struggles early in the season to finally get over that hump this past week?
Yeah, super proud for our kids. They've worked extremely hard. Going into the year, we knew we were going to be a little bit young and inexperienced in a few spots. I think we went down to CSU-Pueblo first game of the year, and 80% of our kids have never played in a college football game. So, we've learned a lot, we've grown a lot, and last week, just really happy for them to continue to give them confidence in the work that they've continued to put in every single day. And then they got rewarded for it in front of a phenomenal homecoming crowd. Homecoming's real special around here at South Dakota Mines. So really happy for our alumni and everybody involved with the weekend.
Yeah, you spoke to being a little bit young and inexperienced. I heading into the season, I was thinking that at the quarterback spot, but Gage Baker really seems to be emerging. What's what's been the key behind his development as this season's gone on, and how he's been seemingly, from my point of view, really growing into a hell of a player.
I think just him trusting himself. He's a redshirt freshman. There's very few redshirt freshmen that start in the Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference. And, he's really stepped up to the plate, comes from a really good high school program. His stats out of high school were like video games. I think he threw for 92 touchdowns his senior year. And, he's just a phenomenal kid. His dad is a coach down in Arizona as well. And, just a football family. And he's really just, immersed himself into our offense, immersed himself into building strong relationships with the skilled kids, with the offensive line, and, really kind of taking the bull by the horns. And, this is going to be, my offense, and we're going to rally around it. And I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure we're successful. And again, for a 19-year-old kid, coming into our system and playing against some really, top caliber football teams early, it really hasn't, he's really got, kind of ice in his veins from that standpoint. He took a big hit this past weekend, got right back up, and
I
was
saw
ready
that
to
one.
go. So
I kind of want to talk about some of your other young players too, because they're all just kind of emerging over the past few weeks. Like Jacoby, he's been playing really well throughout the season, but Joshua Morales, seemed to be another big wideout that's starting to emerge as a deep threat. And then on the defensive end, Charlie Johnson, he seems to be kind of following that lineage of like the really stout, tough middle linebackers that you guys have had over the years. Just how cool is it for you as a coach? You recruit these guys, you see them as high school players, you have a vision for them and what they could be. What is it like to start to see that come to fruition for you as a coach?
yeah, it's great. It just goes to show you, you can, for us, we can go all over the country and find great student athletes. You mentioned Jacoby. Jacoby's from the Dallas, Texas area. He's just a true freshman, going to be a multi-sport athlete here. He's also going to do some track for our institution, like a 45, 47-foot triple jumper coming out of high school.
I believe.
So super athletic kid, but a football savvy kid. Again, not afraid to go across the middle and make some tough catches. And then you mentioned Josh Morales. Josh and Gage Baker were actually high school teammates. So we have a great connection together. Have played together for a long period of time. And defensively, Charlie Johnson, like you'd mentioned, he's really kind of stepped up and taken the place of Hunter Newsome in our defense. Jacob Schwab, some of the linebackers that we've had, in our system for a long period of time. And, they've really stepped up, with their leadership role side of things, and really started to come together.
That's awesome. Well, we got you because you're in a huge, huge game, a huge rivalry this week. The Black Hills Brawl, like I said, it's the 140th edition of this. Can you just speak to this rivalry, and maybe not just from a football perspective, but like from the school's perspective? I know this is more than just a football game, like volleyball, all the sports. This is a big week between the schools, and just what is it like being a part of that?
Yeah, it's awesome. I've been a part of, some big rivalries back at my previous institution. And, but once I came here and really dove into the history of what the rivalry truly is, just how meaningful it is to a lot of different people. We're 45 minutes apart. a lot of people from Spearfish come down to Rapid City to do their
Hmm.
shopping and different things like that. And, so it's a great rivalry. We've got great respect for, Coach Bresky and his football program. But, from an alumni standpoint, it's a tough week because our kids are ready to go. The institutions are ready to go. And, I know Saturday at 6 o'clock at night, there's going to be a phenomenal atmosphere. And, we're just so happy to be a part of it. And I know our kids have really dove into what the history of the rivalry is and really respected it. And, we're hoping to put our best foot forward this Saturday night.
Yeah, you won't have to do any crazy pep talks this week. I'm sure they'll all be ready to go. But the last 4 years, something that I noticed when I was doing some of my research in history was the visiting team has won the last four. You're the visiting team this year. How do you keep that? How do you keep that streak going and take back claim of the homestake trophy? What
Yeah,
what what do you guys need to do to make that happen this weekend?
sure. I think the biggest thing is we've got to just go in there and, like I mentioned before, be cool, calm, and collected. Just go in and yes, it's a big game. We all know that. The institutions know that, but our kids just need to go out and be themselves. They've put themselves in a position, to play in this football game, and they just got to go and be themselves, and kind of let the cards, go as they play. And I think big keys for us is we've got to take care of the football. We've been a little bit more turnover prone than I'd like to be, and offensively we need to do that, and defense needs to get a little, get some turnovers because they're an explosive offense, and they do a really good job of distributing the ball around. And kind of piggybacking on that, because of their explosiveness offensively, we've got to be able to limit those, because of, again, they've got receivers all over the place. The running backs are really good, and Doobie does a really good job of getting the ball to those kids. And offensively, we've got to create some explosive plays. JB, their defensive coordinator, does a really good job of keeping things in front. They're very sound in what they do. And, when we have opportunities for explosive plays, we've got to be able to make them and execute them at a high level. So, it's going to be a high emotional game, a very intense football game, but, we feel those are going to be some key things for us that we have to do in order to put us in a position to be successful.
Well, Coach, we want to just wish you the best of luck this week. We'll definitely be tuned in. It's my game of the week. I wish I was closer so I could go. I'm gonna make it out to one of them pretty soon here. I promise you. But nonetheless, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. We know it's game week, big game week, and we appreciate you just giving us the time and some of your insights into your program and whatnot.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And thank you all for all you do for D2 football, RMAC football. Hopefully Brandon Meisner's out there listening. I've been involved with D2 football for 24 years, and every year this keeps getting bigger and better. So we greatly appreciate everything that you guys do at D2 football.
Heck yeah, Coach. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Well, that was awesome, man. I gotta start getting coaches on here more often. But let's talk about it. Obviously, if I would have asked Coach Flohr to pick, he probably would pick his school. But I wish I had Draper here tonight. I'm gonna do my picks alone. It's gonna be I don't know how I'm gonna do this, but looking at this, you know, let's take this away. I watched the games last week, and I understand what both teams have. Coach Floor is right. Black Hills they have a very explosive offense. TJ Chukwara, we saw that fumble on the video, but he did score another touchdown last week. He's tied for the lead in the nation right now with 9 on the season. How is SD Mines? How are they going to address TJ? Do you shade a safety over him? Do you have Will Lester maybe shade over the corner that's covering him, whichever side? Do you trust your guys to really just cover him? Because I do think Doobie is proven he's going to take his shots with TJ, and TJ's proven to be a reliable guy to come down with those shots. Um, on the defensive end for Black Hills, they're always committed to stopping the run. I don't think SD Mines poses the biggest running threat. They're going to throw the ball 30, 40 times, in my opinion, especially with how well Gage Baker is starting to come along and the ability he's starting to show. I do think SD Mines might have the ability to capitalize on some leaks in the Black Hills secondary if they can stop the Black Hills pass rush. I look for a guy like Herschel Craig to be big in this game. Isaiah Morales has been a beast all season, really, if you've been paying attention. This one's tough. Like I said, 4 straight years the visiting team has won. It is at Black Hills. It's in Spearfish. Ah, it's a rivalry. I feel like Draper would definitely go with SD Mines, you know? I'm gonna go with Black Hills, though. I'm gonna go with Black Hills to hold serve on their home field. I do think SD Mines will put up a fight and make it competitive, but I think Luke Doobie, being the senior, having played, full season start last year, having played in this game last year and won it, I think he'll be ready for the moment, and I think Black Hills will capitalize. TJ Chuck War is back. He wasn't in this game last year. I think that's enough for Black Hills to win, even with it being a rivalry game. But moving along to another rivalry game, one that I personally played in 3 times myself, we got CMU heading to Golden after taking the Nikos Cup from Mons. I think the last time Mesa had won it before last season was 2021, so only a 2-year hiatus. But nonetheless, you see the opposites in records. Mesa coming in at 1-3, Mines at 3-1. I believe Mesa. I've been thinking about this for a couple weeks now. With Mesa being 1-3, is this a game where you make a change at quarterback? Do you give Cole Hansen a shot? Cole Hansen's played in a couple games now. In each game he's come in, I feel like he's shown the ability to really stretch the field. I think Liu's good. Not in the Pueblo game, he didn't take care of the ball. But for the most part, he takes care of the ball and he can operate the offense. But I think Cole brings he's just more dynamic. I think he can stretch the field, and I think you're gonna need to be dynamic if you plan on beating Mines in Golden, and your defense is gonna have to show up. Uh, Capper can do it all. He can pass, he can run. If Landon Walker's in the fold, that's gonna be a big threat. You know, the Maverick in me will always want to pick Mesa to win every game. I won't lie to you guys, but I do have to. I'm an analyst, so I try to not let that shade my judgment. And I just don't think Mesa has the horses. I think they're young in their secondary, even though Gibby's been playing well. Cash came up with a pick. I don't think the secondary is what it was last year. And although mine's receiving core isn't what it was last year, I think they still have enough to where they can challenge the Mesa secondary. And I think Mesa. I think they're going to battle. Bryson Brown, watch out for him. I think he does get another score, just his speed at some point in this game in some way, whether it's a long run, a long catch. I do think they're going to keep incorporating him into this offense, but I don't think Mesa has the horses to go into Golden and get it done. And even though I'm calling for a quarterback change, I don't know if a quarterback change is going to be enough of a shock to the team to be able to go into Golden and get it done against what I still think is a really good Mines team. I know they lost to Chadron, but Chadron's a really good team too. There's some parity in the conference this year. Everybody's really good. So I do think Mesa battles. I think they've shown that the past 2 weeks they didn't really give up in either game. They battled to the end. But I think Mines they'll be able to win on their home field, and I'm expecting Golden to be pretty raucous this weekend too. Another a game that I earlier when we were looking at the big title card with all the games that I kind of highlighted is sneaky good is CSU-Pueblo heading down I-25 to New Mexico Highlands. Highlands coming off their first loss this season to a really tough Western team, number 5 team in the country. Nothing really to be ashamed about losing that game. You would have liked to see your offense actually get in the end zone, put up more than 3 points, but I mean, even with that performance, they're still averaging 38 and a half a game. The problem is, though, you're also giving up 38 a game. I saw their defense play really well for a half. I saw them get pressure on Drew Nash. They can cover. They have some good DBs on the back end. I think Highlands is really talented. I think they just still have some, I'm not going to say immaturity, but just they haven't been in this position in a couple years where they're a team that's winning ball games and is consistently winning them. So I think there's a learning curve to that, and I think part of that learning curve was last week. What's going to be interesting is the response. How do you respond? Because you're not really getting like an easier test. You're getting CSU Pueblo right after Western, who, although they're both, ranked teams, CSU Pueblo is a very different team than Western. They have a very, very explosive passing game with a bunch of different receivers. So I think you're going to see Highlands challenged in a different way than they were last week up in Gunnison. So I'm very interested to see how they respond. For my prediction, I'm not going to pick against CSU Pueblo. I think CSU Pueblo is really focused. Like I said, I think that Hayes loss was just what they needed. I even think that really close call, Central Missouri, was, going through adversity. It does something to a team, and I think we're seeing that with CSU Pueblo. I think Highlands is going to be competitive. Um, I know that Jeffrey Jones was dealing with some shoulder pain. Um, but I do believe he's going to be playing this week. He did say in the game he didn't come out of the game. I saw him with his shoulder pads off for a little bit, but he was still in the game. But I would like to see Highlands get Tavita Valetti more involved, get him some more carries. I can only remember seeing him get one or two carries last week, so I'd love to see them get him more involved. I think if Highlands is going to win this ball game, I think it's going to be ball control. You're going to have to get that rushing offense going again. Last week it was kind of bottled up, but if you want to win this game, I think it's going to be ball control and keeping the ball away from CSU Pueblo's offense, keeping Roman Fuller on the sideline, and you're gonna have to cause some turnovers. Um, you saw pressure, you saw TFLs last week and sacks from the Highlands defense, but you didn't really see any turnovers. You're gonna have to force some turnovers if you want to win this ball game. On Pueblo's end, just like I said, I think they've been through the adversity. I think they're going to handle business on the road. So I got Pueblo winning this one, but I wouldn't be surprised if Highlands makes it competitive, just like they did last week with Western. But I think Pueblo will prevail. We got Western heading to Fort Lewis. I'm going to be real with you guys. I'm not sure that this is good. I don't think this is going to be a very close game. I think Fort Lewis has come a long way, but I think Western and the problems they present for every offense with just their ability to create havoc in the backfield, I think is going to be entirely too much. Stone's injury status is up in the air. I'm not sure if he's playing or not. Jacob Morris, I do think he showed a little bit more elusivity. You guys know what I'm trying to say. Elusivity this past week, getting away from the rush and whatnot. But I just think he's going to be under fire all day, and I don't think the Fort Lewis offense is just ready for what Western presents. And then on the defensive end, I just think Drew Nash. I think he's in line to have a big day. I think he played well last week. He did what he had to do. He's the president. He always does what he has to do. But I don't think he was, exceptional last week. I think he's in line to have a big day. I think Coach McLean's going to come up with some creative plays, and I think you're going to see Western roll in this one. After having a close half with Highlands last week, I think they'll be determined this week to get off to a fast start, and I think that's going to prove trouble for Fort Lewis. I got Western winning this one big. Our last game of the week is going to be Chadron and Adams. Adams still winless at 0-4. They've had a tough stretch of it. They're welcoming the Eagles, who are on a 3-game winning streak right now. And I'm thinking Chadron, they're going to extend this to a 4-game winning streak. I don't see Adams really posing any real threat to Chadron's defense. I do think Gavin's awesome. He's super athletic, but I think some of the same things you saw last week with Adams, just the amount of pressure that CSU Pueblo was able to cause and whatnot. I think Chadron's capable of doing the exact same thing. I think Chadron's front seven is legit, and I think Chadron's back end is legit as well. My man Dax Sharati has had picks in consecutive games. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get another one in this game. I think Chadron's going to roll this week, and I feel sorry for the Grizzlies. They're having a rough go of it after having a really rough go of it last season. But this is college football, especially in this conference. This conference has a lot of really good teams, and it's tough every week. So uh, don't know what more to say about that one. Before we go, though, I want to thank everybody that helped put this together. Tim Flynn in Mines, they're always helping out. Amelia Lucasen over at Western Colorado, always appreciate her. My boy Oli Tase at CSU-Pueblo, and then the fine folks at KOTA, their sports department, Mr. Vic Quick, and all the guys over there. Always super thankful for how much they do for us in the video aspect of our podcast. But that being said, there's not too much more I can say. I hope to see people at games this week. Personally, I think you guys know which game I'm going to. I got to go see my Mavericks. Hopefully they can retain the cup. If so, I'm going to make sure to get a picture with it. But hey, we'll see you guys next week. We'll have Draper back, and we'll be back on Wednesday next week, I promise. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week.